There are moments in my 38 years on the bench where the silence in the courtroom weighs more than any gavel I could strike. This was one of those moments. The young man standing before me, Brandon Whitmore, 28 years old, had just said something that made every person in the gallery hold their breath. "My father is a senator. You work for us." The words hung in the air like a visible slap. I watched as the veteran sitting in the first row, a 71-year-old man wearing a cap that read Vietnam 1969, clenched his fists on his lap. His name was James Patterson, and 3 days earlier, this arrogant young man had shoved him against a brick wall in a parking lot, leaving him with a fractured rib and a black eye that still gleamed with shades of purple and yellow. What do you do when the son of a powerful politician believes laws are optional suggestions? When privilege has been so deeply internalized that a man can look a judge in the eye and claim ownership over the justice system itself? Before I tell you how I responded to that statement, I need you to do something. If you believe in real justice, in honoring our veterans, in holding people accountable regardless of their last name or political connections, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is going to spread everywhere, and you're not going to want to miss how it ended. It was a Tuesday morning, 10:15 a.m., to be exact, when the court clerk, Miss Reyes, called the case. State of Rhode Island versus Brandon Michael Whitmore. Charges: assault and battery on a person over 65. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest. I looked up from my papers. The young man who entered my courtroom didn't look like a criminal. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary in that room. His hair was perfectly slicked back, his Rolex gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and he walked with that particular confidence that only comes from never having faced real consequences in your life. Behind him came Marcus Feldman, one of Providence's most expensive defense attorneys, the kind who specializes in making problems disappear for clients who can afford his hourly rate. But what caught my attention immediately was Brandon's demeanor. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't contrite. He looked annoyed, as if this entire proceeding was an inconvenience, interrupting his more important schedule. I've seen that look before, usually on people who believe the rules apply to everyone else. The gallery was packed that morning. Word had spread about this case. Local news reporters sat in the back row with their notebooks. Veterans advocacy groups had sent representatives. And sitting in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table, was James Patterson himself. He sat with the quiet dignity that comes from a lifetime of service and sacrifice. His back was straight, despite the pain I knew he must be feeling from that fractured rib. His eyes were clear and focused. This was a man who had faced enemy fire in the jungles of Southeast Asia. He wasn't going to be intimidated by a courtroom or a senator's son. "Mr. Whitmore," I began, my voice measured and calm, "you're charged with serious offenses. Before we proceed, I want to make sure you understand the nature of these charges." Brandon barely glanced at me. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through something with his thumb. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, trying to get him to put the device away. Brandon shrugged him off. "Mr. Whitmore," I said again, this time with more steel in my voice, "put the phone away and address this court." He looked up slowly, making deliberate eye contact as he placed the phone on the table in front of him. Not in his pocket, on the table. A statement that he'd comply with my request, but only temporarily, only because he chose to. "I'm here, aren't I?" he said. His voice carried that particular tone of bored contempt that made several people in the gallery shift uncomfortably in their seats. "That's not what I asked," I replied. "Do you understand the charges against you?" His attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client understands the charges and is prepared to enter a plea of not guilty. We believe this is a case of misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion." I raised my hand. "Counselor," I asked your client, not you. "Mr. Whitmore, do you have a voice?" Brandon stood, adjusting his suit jacket with deliberate slowness. "Not guilty, Your Honor." "This whole thing is ridiculous. The old man got in my way, and now I'm being dragged through the system like some kind of criminal." The old man. He called a decorated Vietnam veteran the old man. I removed my glasses slowly, cleaning them with the cloth I keep in my pocket. It's a habit I developed years ago, a physical action that gives me a moment to control my reaction when I hear something that makes my blood pressure rise. "Mr. Whitmore," I said, putting my glasses back on, "let me make sure I understand. You're referring to Mr. James Patterson, a man who served 2 tours in Vietnam, who received the Bronze Star for valor, who spent 30 years as a firefighter in this city after his military service. You're calling him the old man who got in your way?" Brandon shrugged. I didn't know he was a veteran. How was I supposed to know that? The prosecutor, Jennifer Chen, stood up. She was a sharp young attorney who had been with the DA's office for 5 years. Your Honor, may I present evidence? I nodded. Please proceed. She walked to the evidence table and picked up a tablet. Your Honor, we have security camera footage from the parking lot of Shaw's Supermarket on Hope Street, where this incident occurred on Saturday, November 18th at approximately 2:30 p.m. The bailiff, Officer D'Angelo, dimmed the lights and turned on the monitor. The entire courtroom watched as the video began to play. The footage was clear, high-definition color. It showed the parking lot from an elevated angle. We could see James Patterson walking toward his car, a modest Toyota Camry, carrying 2 bags of groceries. He was moving slowly, carefully, the way people do when every step causes pain from old injuries and older age. Then Brandon's BMW came into frame. He was driving fast, too fast for a parking lot. He swerved into a handicapped space, even though there was no handicapped placard visible in his windshield. The car stopped abruptly. Patterson was walking past, just a few feet away. He paused, turned, and appeared to say something to Brandon through the car window. Brandon got out of his car. Even in the silent security footage, you could see the aggression in his body language. He walked directly toward Patterson, his finger pointing, his face animated with anger. Patterson raised his hands in a placating gesture, clearly trying to de-escalate. Then it happened. Brandon shoved Patterson with both hands, hard enough that the elderly veteran stumbled backward into the brick wall of the supermarket. Patterson's grocery bags fell. Apples rolled across the pavement. His body hit the wall, and you could see him grab his side, his face contorting in pain. Brandon stood over him, still yelling, though the security camera captured no audio. 2 bystanders rushed over. One helped Patterson to his feet. Another confronted Brandon, who pushed past them, got back in his BMW, and drove away. The timestamp on the video read 2:34 p.m. 4 minutes from start to finish. 4 minutes that left a 71-year-old veteran with a fractured rib, severe bruising, and a hospital bill he couldn't afford. The lights came back on. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I looked at Brandon. His jaw was tight, but he still didn't look remorseful. He looked caught. Mr. Whitmore, I said quietly, what did Mr. Patterson say to you that made you react that way? Brandon's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client doesn't have to answer that. No, Counselor, he doesn't have to. But I'm asking him to. Mr. Whitmore, what started this confrontation? Brandon looked at his attorney, who was shaking his head slightly. Then he looked back at me with that same contemptuous expression. He told me I couldn't park in the handicapped space. He said it was illegal. I told him to mind his own business. The prosecutor spoke again. Your Honor, we have a witness statement from Mr. Patterson. May I read it into the record? Please do. Jennifer Chen picked up a document. Statement from James Patterson, taken November 19th at Rhode Island Hospital. Quote, I saw the young man park in the handicapped space. He didn't have a placard. I've seen too many people take those spaces who don't need them, making it harder for people who do. I politely told him he shouldn't park there, that those spaces are for people with disabilities. He cursed at me. He called me an old fool who should mind my own business. I started to walk away because I didn't want confrontation. Then he got out of his car and came at me. He said, Do you know who I am? My father is Senator Whitmore. I can park wherever I want. Then he shoved me. I hit the wall. I heard something crack in my chest. The pain was immediate and severe. He stood over me and said, Next time, keep your mouth shut, old man. Then he left. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I raised my hand for silence. Mr. Whitmore, is Mr. Patterson's account accurate? Brandon's face flushed red. He's exaggerating. I barely touched him. And yes, I mentioned my father because people in this city need to understand who they're dealing with. There it was, the entitlement laid bare. Not shame, not remorse, but pride in using his father's position as a weapon. Tell me about your father. I said, Tell me about Senator Whitmore. Brandon's posture straightened. My father is Senator Richard Whitmore. He served Rhode Island for 12 years. He chairs the Judiciary Committee. He's respected throughout the state. And you believe that gives you special privileges? I asked. I believe it means I shouldn't be harassed by random people in parking lots, and I shouldn't be dragged through a courtroom over something this trivial. The word trivial hung in the air. Trivial. A fractured rib is trivial. Assaulting a veteran is trivial. Breaking the law is trivial if your father is a senator. I leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, Let me share something with you. In my 38 years on this bench, I've seen thousands of people come through this courtroom. Rich, poor, connected, unknown. Do you know what the law cares about? None of that. The law cares about actions and consequences. Your Honor, his attorney tried to interject. Mr. Feldman, sit down. Your client wanted to tell me about his father. Now I'm going to tell him about mine. I looked directly at Brandon. My father was an immigrant. He came to this country with nothing. He worked as a milkman, delivering bottles door to door in the freezing cold and the summer heat. He taught me that in America, everyone is equal under the law. That's not a nice sentiment. It's the foundation of our justice system. Your father's position doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change Mr. Patterson's fractured rib. And it certainly doesn't change how I'm going to handle this case. If you believe that privilege shouldn't buy freedom from accountability, leave a comment below telling me about a time you witnessed entitlement challenged by justice. Share this video if you think every young person who believes their parents' success excuses their own behavior needs to see what happens in a real courtroom. And subscribe, because what I'm about to do next will restore your faith that justice still works. Brandon's attorney sensed the shift in the room. Your Honor, my client is young. He made a mistake in the heat of the moment. His father is willing to have Mr. Patterson's medical bills paid in full, plus additional compensation for his pain and suffering. We can resolve this matter today without further proceedings. I turned to James Patterson. Mr. Patterson, would you like to address the court? The elderly veteran stood slowly, using the bench in front of him for support. When he spoke, his voice was strong, clear, the voice of a man who had commanded others in combat. Your Honor, I don't want his family's money. I want him to understand that you can't treat people like obstacles to be shoved aside. I spent 2 years in Vietnam watching young men, some even younger than him, learn what it means to respect others, to serve something bigger than themselves. Some of those young men never came home. They died, protecting the freedom that allows his father to serve in the Senate, that allows him to drive his expensive car and wear his expensive suit. Patterson paused, his hand still pressed against his injured ribs. I'm 71 years old. I've got arthritis in both knees. My hearing isn't what it used to be, and my back hurts every morning when I get out of bed. But I would never use my age or my service record to demand special treatment. I just wanted him to follow the same rules everyone else follows. Park in a regular space. Don't take what belongs to people who need it more. That's all. He sat down. The gallery was absolutely still. I looked at Brandon. For the first time since entering my courtroom, he looked uncertain. Mr. Whitmore, do you have anything to say to Mr. Patterson? Brandon glanced at his attorney, who nodded encouragingly. I'm sorry he got hurt. It wasn't my intention. That's not an apology. I said, that's a statement of regret about consequences. An apology acknowledges wrongdoing. It takes responsibility. Try again. Brandon's face flushed darker. His hands gripped the edge of the table. With all due respect, Your Honor, I think this has gone far enough. Yes, there was an altercation. Yes, he got injured. But I'm not some violent criminal. I'm a graduate of Brown University. I work in finance. I pay more in taxes than most people in this room earn in a year. My father serves this state. We're not bad people. Your education doesn't make you better than Mr. Patterson, I said quietly. Your income doesn't make you better. Your father's position doesn't make you better. And the fact that you think those things matter in this context tells me everything I need to know about your character. Your Honor, his attorney stood again, desperation creeping into his voice. This is highly irregular. You're making character judgments that go beyond the scope of this hearing. Counselor, your client assaulted a 71-year-old veteran over a parking space and then invoked his father's political position as justification. Character is absolutely relevant. I picked up the file. Let me tell you what else is in this file, Mr. Whitmore. This isn't your first incident. 2 years ago, you were cited for public intoxication and disorderly conduct outside a nightclub in Newport. Those charges were dropped. Last year, you were involved in a road rage incident on I-95 where witnesses said you followed another driver for 3 miles, honking and making obscene gestures. That complaint was withdrawn. 6 months ago, you were asked to leave a restaurant after berating a waiter loud enough that other diners complained. The restaurant chose not to press charges. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, we weren't aware of those incidents. Were the records sealed? Some were sealed. Some were simply made to disappear. But I have sources in this community, and when a case involving Senator Whitmore's son comes across my desk, I make it my business to understand the full context. I looked at Brandon. Do you see the pattern, Mr. Whitmore? You keep doing things that would get other people arrested, fined, or worse. But somehow your problems go away. Charges dropped. Complaints withdrawn. Records sealed. You've been insulated from consequences your entire adult life, and it's made you believe you're untouchable. My father didn't make those problems go away, Brandon said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe not directly, but his position created a climate where people were afraid to hold you accountable. District attorneys who don't want to upset a powerful senator. Business owners who fear political retaliation. That ends today. I stood up. When I stand during a hearing, everyone in my courtroom knows something significant is about to happen. Here's what's going to occur. First, I'm going to take a 15-minute recess. During that recess, Mr. Feldman, you're going to call Senator Whitmore and tell him to come to this courtroom. I want him here before I pass sentence. Brandon's eyes widened. You can't make my father come here. He's a sitting senator with committee obligations. Your father represents the people of Rhode Island. I am one of those people, and I'm asking him to be present for his son's sentencing. If he refuses, that tells me everything I need to know about his priorities. 15 minutes. Court is in recess. The bailiff called, "All rise," and I stepped down from the bench and walked to my chambers. Officer D'Angelo followed me. Judge, are you sure about this? Senator Whitmore is powerful. He could make things difficult. Vincent, I said, using his first name because we'd known each other for 20 years, if I worried about powerful people making things difficult, I'd never make any difficult decisions. Besides, I'm 76 years old. What's he going to do, end my career? I've been thinking about retirement anyway. Vincent smiled. You say that every year, and every year you come back, because cases like this remind me why this job matters. I sat at my desk and pulled out the file on Brandon Whitmore. I read through every incident, every complaint, every charge that had mysteriously evaporated. I thought about James Patterson, sitting in that courtroom with a fractured rib because he had the audacity to ask a privileged young man to follow the rules. I thought about all the other James Pattersons out there, elderly people and disabled people and vulnerable people who get pushed aside by those who believe power gives them the right to ignore common decency. 12 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Miss Reyes entered. Judge, Senator Whitmore is here. He's very angry. Show him in. Senator Richard Whitmore entered my chambers like he owned them. He was a tall man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the commanding presence that comes from years in politics. He didn't wait for me to speak. Judge Caprio, this is outrageous. You cannot summon a sitting United States senator like some common defendant. I gestured to a chair. Senator, please sit down. I'll stand. I have a committee hearing in 2 hours. Then you'd better sit down quickly, because this conversation is going to take at least 10 minutes, and I'm not going to spend them looking up at you. He sat, his face tight with controlled anger. My son called me. He said you're treating him like a violent criminal over a minor altercation. Your son shoved a 71-year-old decorated veteran against a wall, fracturing his rib. That's not a minor altercation. That's assault and battery on an elderly person, which is a felony in Rhode Island. The victim was blocking his path. Brandon defended himself. Senator, I've watched the security footage. Mr. Patterson was walking past your son's illegally parked car. He made a polite comment about the parking violation. Your son got out of his vehicle and initiated physical contact. There was no self-defense. There was assault. The senator's jaw clenched. Judge, let me be frank. My family has deep roots in this community. We've contributed significantly to Providence. I've secured federal funding for infrastructure, education, health care. I've served this state honorably for 12 years. I'm aware of your service, Senator. Then you're also aware that my son is a good person who made a mistake. Young men do stupid things. They learn from them and move on. Dragging this through the courts, making a spectacle of it, benefits no one. I leaned back in my chair. Senator, do you know what your son said to Mr. Patterson after he shoved him against that wall? I'm sure emotions were high. He said, "Next time, keep your mouth shut." Old man, does that sound like a good person making a mistake, or does that sound like an entitled bully who's never faced consequences? The senator's expression hardened. What do you want, Judge? I want you to understand that your son is about to be held accountable for his actions, and I want you to understand that any attempt to interfere with that process will become part of the public record. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. Your son assaulted someone. The evidence is clear. The victim deserves justice. And justice is what he's going to get. regardless of who your son's father is. The senator stood. You're making a mistake. You're turning a simple assault case into a political statement, and that's not justice. That's grandstanding. No, Senator. Grandstanding is what your son did when he invoked your name in a parking lot to intimidate a veteran. Justice is what happens when someone finally tells him no. My attorneys will appeal whatever sentence you impose. That's your right, but the appeal will be public. The evidence will be public. The video of your son assaulting an elderly man will be played in every courtroom and every media outlet that covers the appeal. Is that really what you want? The senator's face went pale. For the first time since entering my chambers, he looked uncertain. What are you going to do? I'm going to sentence your son fairly according to the law and the facts of the case. And you're going to sit in that courtroom and watch, because maybe, just maybe, seeing his father witness the consequences will mean something to him. And if I refuse to attend, then I'll note your absence in the record, and everyone will know that Senator Richard Whitmore chose committee obligations over his son's moment of accountability. 5 seconds of silence. 7, 10, 12. That's how long it took for a powerful man to realize he had no power in my chambers. I'll be there, the senator said quietly. Thank you. Court resumes in 3 minutes. We walked back into the courtroom together, the senator and I. The gallery had swelled during the recess. More reporters, more observers, more veterans wearing their service caps in solidarity with James Patterson. Brandon stood at the defense table, his confident demeanor cracked by the presence of his father. Senator Whitmore sat in the front row, directly across the aisle from James Patterson. The two men locked eyes for a moment. The senator looked away first. This court is back in session, Officer D'Angelo announced. I sat down, adjusted my glasses, and looked at Brandon Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. I've watched the security footage multiple times. I've read Mr. Patterson's statement. I've examined your history of similar incidents that were never properly adjudicated. And I've listened to your words here today, words that showed not remorse but entitlement, not humility but arrogance. I paused. I find you guilty of assault and battery on a person over 65 years of age. This is a felony offense that carries serious penalties. Brandon's attorney started to object, but I raised my hand. Your client had the opportunity to accept a plea agreement. He refused, believing this court wouldn't hold him accountable. He was wrong. I looked down at my notes. Here is your sentence. You will serve 90 days in the adult correctional institutions, with 60 days suspended. That means 30 days of actual incarceration. You will serve those 30 days on weekends to minimize disruption to your employment. Every Friday evening at 6 p.m., you will report to the ACI. Every Sunday evening at 6 p.m., you will be released. This will continue for 15 consecutive weekends. Brandon's face went white. His attorney stood. Your Honor, weekend incarceration for a first-time offender on a misdemeanor-level assault is extremely harsh. Counselor, this is a felony assault on an elderly victim with aggravating circumstances, including your client's statement that he assaulted Mr. Patterson because of his father's political position. That's not a mitigating factor. It's an aggravating one, I continued. In addition to the 30 days of incarceration, you will complete 200 hours of community service. Not at a charity gala where you can network with Providence's elite. You will serve those hours at the VA hospital, specifically in the geriatric ward, where you will assist elderly veterans with daily activities. You will help them walk to physical therapy. You will read to those who can no longer see well. You will listen to their stories. You will learn what service and sacrifice actually mean. Furthermore, you will pay full restitution to Mr. Patterson for his medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. The amount is $8,500. You will also pay a fine of $2,000 to the state, and you will write a formal letter of apology to Mr. Patterson, which you will read aloud in this courtroom at a hearing scheduled for 60 days from today. I looked directly at him. But here's the most important part of your sentence, Mr. Whitmore. For the next 12 months, any violation of the law, any citation, any complaint of threatening behavior, any incident where you invoke your father's name to intimidate or influence others will result in the immediate activation of your 60-day suspended sentence. That means 1 traffic ticket, 1 noise complaint, 1 bar fight, and you're going back to jail for 2 months. Do you understand? Brandon nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. I turned to Senator Whitmore. Senator, I want to be clear. This sentence is not about you. It's about your son's actions and the victim he harmed. However, I'm going to say something publicly that I hope you'll consider privately. Your son didn't develop this sense of entitlement in a vacuum. He learned it from watching consequences disappear, from seeing problems solved by connections rather than contrition, from growing up in an environment where his last name opened doors and closed investigations. The senator's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The greatest gift you can give your son right now is not another attorney, not another phone call to make this go away, not another exercise of influence. The greatest gift is to let him face these consequences fully and completely. Let him serve his time. Let him complete his community service. Let him learn that in a courtroom, everyone is equal, regardless of their father's title. I looked back at Brandon. Mr. Whitmore, 30 years ago, I sentenced a young man very much like you. He came from a wealthy family. He'd assaulted someone in a moment of entitlement. He stood before me with that same expression you had when you walked in here this morning, that look that said the rules didn't really apply to him. I gave him a harsh sentence. His family was furious. His attorneys filed appeals. But he served his time. And you know what happened? 10 years later, he came back to this courtroom. He asked to speak to me. He told me that serving that sentence was the best thing that ever happened to him. It taught him accountability. It taught him humility. It taught him that his family's money and connections couldn't shield him from the consequences of his own choices. He's now a successful businessman who donates his time mentoring at-risk youth. He credits that sentence with changing his life. I paused. I'm giving you the same opportunity. You can be angry. You can feel victimized. You can believe this is unfair. Or you can accept this sentence, serve it with dignity, and become a better man. The choice is yours. The sentencing was over, but I had one more thing to do. Mr. Patterson, would you approach the bench, please? James Patterson stood slowly and walked forward. When he reached the bench, I stood and came down to his level. I extended my hand. He shook it, his grip still firm despite his 71 years. Mr. Patterson, on behalf of this court and this community, I want to thank you for your service to this country and to this city. I want to apologize that you were victimized in a parking lot simply for asking someone to follow the rules. And I want you to know that today, justice was served in your honor. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I wanted, just to be heard, just to matter. You matter, Mr. Patterson. You've always mattered. I looked at Brandon. Mr. Whitmore, shake Mr. Patterson's hand. Brandon hesitated. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Slowly, Brandon walked over and extended his hand. Patterson looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it. Son, Patterson said quietly, I hope you learn from this. I really do, because privilege is a gift, but it comes with responsibility. Use yours better. Brandon nodded, unable to speak. The handshake lasted 5 seconds. 7, 10, 12, long enough for everyone in the courtroom to understand that this moment mattered. Long enough for a young man to begin to understand the weight of his actions. Long enough for an elderly veteran to receive the dignity and respect he'd earned through decades of service. That handshake was justice in its purest form. 3 months later, I received a letter. It was handwritten on plain paper, not expensive stationery. Dear Judge Caprio, I'm writing this from the geriatric ward of the VA hospital, where I've just completed my 120th hour of community service. I have 80 hours left. Last week, I met a man named Robert Chen. He's 84 years old. He served in Korea. He has no family left, and most days, no one visits him. I've been reading to him 3 times a week. Yesterday, he told me about the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, where he watched his best friend die saving his unit. He cried when he told me. Then he thanked me for listening, for caring enough to hear his story. Judge Caprio, I need you to know something. When you sentenced me, I was furious. I thought you were making an example of me because of who my father is. I thought it was political. I thought it was unfair. I was wrong. These past 3 months serving my weekend sentences working at the VA have taught me more about character and humility than my entire expensive education. I've met veterans who sacrificed everything for strangers. I've met elderly people who face each day with courage I can't imagine. I've learned that respect isn't something you inherit or buy. It's something you earn through how you treat people, especially those who can't do anything for you in return. I read my apology letter to Mr. Patterson last week in your courtroom. I meant every word. He forgave me, which is more than I deserved. I'm not the same person who walked into your courtroom 3 months ago. I'm not sure who I'm becoming yet, but I know he's better than who I was. Thank you for not letting me get away with it. Thank you for treating me like everyone else. Thank you for teaching me that in your courtroom and in life, we're all equal under the law. Respectfully, Brandon Whitmore. I kept that letter. I keep it in my desk drawer, and sometimes, when I'm having a difficult day, when I'm wondering if any of this matters, I take it out and read it again. Because it reminds me why I've spent 38 years on this bench. Not to punish, but to teach. Not to destroy, but to transform. Not to exercise power, but to serve justice. 6 months after the sentencing, the Providence City Council passed a resolution. It was sponsored by several council members and co-signed by community organizations, veterans groups, and advocacy coalitions. The resolution established new training requirements for law enforcement on how to handle complaints involving connected families. It created an oversight committee to review cases where charges against children of public officials were dropped or reduced. It mandated that all such cases be subject to additional scrutiny to ensure equal treatment under the law. Senator Whitmore voted for the resolution. In his speech on the Senate floor, he said, "My son's case taught me something important. Public service means holding ourselves to higher standards, not lower ones. It means teaching our children that our positions are not shields against accountability, but responsibilities that demand greater integrity." I support this resolution because every parent, whether they're a senator or a store clerk, wants their children to grow up understanding that actions have consequences and that justice is truly blind. The speech was covered by national media. Some called it political calculation. Others called it genuine growth. I called it irrelevant. What mattered was that the system had worked. A powerful family's son had been held accountable. A veteran had received justice. And maybe, just maybe, the next Brandon Whitmore would think twice before assuming his last name exempted him from basic human decency. James Patterson sent me a card on Veterans Day that year. It had a simple message. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for reminding me that service still matters in this country. I framed that card and hung it in my chambers right next to my law degree and my commission as a judge. Because James Patterson represents every person who has ever felt invisible, every veteran who has wondered if their sacrifice still means something, every elderly individual who has been pushed aside by someone younger and more arrogant. His case wasn't just about one parking lot confrontation. It was about whether our system of justice can still function when power and privilege try to tip the scales. It was about whether a judge can still look a senator's son in the eye and say, "Not in my courtroom, not today, not ever." Every day people ask me how I do this job, how I handle the pressure, the difficult decisions, the powerful people who try to influence outcomes. The answer is simple. I remember why I took this oath. I remember that justice isn't about making everyone happy. It's about treating everyone fairly. I remember that my courtroom might be the only place where a 1-year-old veteran on a fixed income has exactly the same standing as a senator's son. And I remember that every decision I make sends a message about what kind of society we want to be. Do we want a society where your father's title determines your treatment? Or do we want a society where everyone, truly everyone, is equal under the law? In my courtroom, we chose equality, we chose accountability, we chose justice. And that choice, made one case at a time, one defendant at a time, one victim at a time, is how we build a justice system worthy of the sacrifices people like James Patterson made for this country. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that justice still works. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that courtrooms should be the one place where money and connections mean nothing and character means everything. And remember, privilege is not a shield. Service is not weakness. And in the end, we're all accountable for our choices, no matter who our fathers are. That's the legacy I want to leave after 38 years on this bench. That's the lesson Brandon Whitmore learned, and that's the promise I make to every James Patterson who walks into my courtroom. You will be heard, you will be respected, and you will receive justice. Because in here, everyone matters, everyone is equal, and everyone answers for their actions. That's not just good law, that's the foundation of a decent society. Court adjourned.